Tommy Schnermacher Show on CJAD 800.
A fascinating letter I got from someone who describes himself as a concerned Québécois. It's a letter he sent to Philippe Couillard. He sent me a copy of it, and I want to share it with you. That's coming up in a matter of moments. About lots of people weighing in on these ungrateful kids. And their sense of self-entitlement is senseless. Now, let me read you this letter. It's written to Philippe Couillard, the leader of the Liberal Party, and this is what it says. I am worried for my province. I'm worried that our political system has become more of an exercise in the manipulation of people's emotions instead of helping formalize people's opinion. I'm worried that our political discourse is increasingly xenophobic, or on the other side of the fence, alarmingly complacent and subdued. I'm worried that my existing government is quite clearly involved in a campaign designed to pit me against my neighbor instead of harnessing the potential and celebrating the accomplishments that can only come from an open-minded, diverse society such as our own. And I'm worried that Quebec, this unique island of assorted culture, history, and tradition, is going to lose its true identity in the name of those old soldiers who are still fighting a war that was won a long time ago. But what I'm worried about, Mr. Couillard, is that everyone seems to fear the future of Quebec. No one is really doing anything about it, and I am at a complete loss on why. I consider myself quite lucky to live in a country where we are, he says, I am French Québécois, pur laine, and I do not agree with most things that Pauline Marois stands for, and neither do most French Quebecers. Many of them would no longer support Madame Marois if someone would take the time to explain the tremendous step back we would take if we allowed this type of intolerant individual to have a majority government. Someone needs to introduce the term slippery slope into this debate. Although not religious myself, I am not in favor of removing people's religious freedoms, especially under the false pretense of promoting human rights. It's actually quite obvious to me that this strategy was designed to escalate a climate of intolerance, thereby reinforcing a false perspective that the Quebec culture is at risk. It also serves to minimize the amount of non-PQ votes through attrition, alluding to potential government persecution and aimed specifically at those who are prone to be more sensitive to the reality of an oppressive government, having already uprooted their families in search of an enlightened people. And the guy who wrote this letter, Marc Blanchard, he says, are we still an enlightened people? He says someone needs to point out that any government that attempts to gain power by ostracizing part of its own population is at the least perilously short-sighted and at most blatantly intolerant, and that doesn't bode well for anyone. He goes on to say, I consider myself quite lucky to live in a country where we are the example to the rest of the world of how wonderful life can be when we can accept and embrace one another, how strong we've become because of our common values and principles, and how rich and unique we are because of our diversity and differences. He goes on to say, Madame Marois is using a different approach, one that I believe we'd grown up from, one I thought was left in elementary schoolyards with children too naive to know the difference, divide and conquer through ridicule, ignorance, and intolerance. She wants us to revert back to an era where we first seek to persecute what's different or not familiar instead of trying to understand it. She wants us to stunt our evolution as a people and as a country for a goal that has long become obsolete. We're part of a global economy. We should not only try to speak two languages, we should speak as many as possible. We shouldn't ignore various cultures and traditions. We should study and understand them. That's the society we Quebecers of every culture, color, religion, and background have worked so hard to create. We all worked on that. She wants us to make a U-turn and go back to the 70s where opinion and movement had a semblance of validity, and she wants us to do it in spite of her own people. It's time we made this clear to every voter in every language before it is too late, and just in case someone isn't sure about her intentions. He gives this quote. This is something Pauline Marois said. She said, I joined the PQ in the 1970s because of the issue of sovereignty, and that's why I wake up in the morning. A woman who gives birth to a country? That would be interesting. That's a quote from Pauline Marois. He goes on to conclude, it doesn't get clearer than that. We're not voting for a party. We're voting for the future of our province, our country, our families, our friends, and our countrymen. That is what we should be shouting from every rooftop in as many languages as possible. And I have no problems if the French version is twice as loud, because we are the ones who stand to lose the most when all is said and done. Mr. Couillard, you wanted to represent us, be our voice, but I can't hear you yet. And it's signed Marc Blanchard, and he describes himself as French Québécois pur laine, and he doesn't agree with what Pauline Marois stands for, and he says neither do many other Québécois. So I think it's very important. I read that letter. It was sent to me, and I decided it was important to read it to you, because we shouldn't be under the impression that all Francophones agree with Pauline Marois. Far from it. And I think this sums it up very, very, very well. This was, I'm worried you're the only person who'll ever read this letter, Tommy. Another one says, great letter. Congratulations. Another one says, bravo. Another one says, I absolutely agree with every word in his letter. And what I thought was really the most interesting part of the whole letter is saying on one side you've got xenophobia, and on the other side you've got silence, complacency. That's the problem. And he makes an excellent point about that. That's very true. On one side of the fence, the discourse is xenophobic. On the other side, alarmingly complacent and subdued. I think this is the kind of letter this is a letter to Philippe Couillard. Should I tell you something? This should be a letter from Philippe Couillard. This is a message that he has 3 weeks to deliver. 3 more weeks of the campaign, and that is very, very important. Speaking of the campaign, I did want to tell you in advance, coming up Monday, our political debate at 9:30 is going to tackle the issue of sovereignty and referendums. And our guest from the PQ on that subject at 9:30 on the Tommy Schnurmacher Show will be none other than Jean-Francois Lisée. Chantal saying it's an excellent letter, please publish. Very, very important to know that there are many people who feel this way and who sense a frustration, that there is a general frustration that this message has not been heard often enough. Some people would say it has not been heard at all. 11:45 the time. We're going to check your francophone pur laine de souche, as he describes himself, and look at the texts that are flooding in. This one says, my family dates back to the 1750s in this province. I live and breathe in a minimum of 2 languages. I couldn't agree more with that man and his words. That's from Charles-François Vigneault. I think we're getting lots of texts from francophones who agree with what he had to say. Mario says, it's not a choice between the good Liberals and the bad PQ. The main reason for the last 40 years of economic decline in Quebec has been Bill 101, and the Liberals have done every bit as much to support this as the PQ ever did, keeping the province permanently on transfer payment, life support, while head offices have moved one after the other to Toronto. I wonder if the letter writer understands that. That's from Mario. Another texter saying, I'm Greek-Canadian. I love the warmth of soul the French people have. This is a perfect example. Another texter saying, let's invite him to a barbecue. What a nice guy. He's smart. This texter feels only the Quebecois upper class will be better off in an independent Quebec. And lots of you saying, can we share the letter on social media, put it on the CJD website? Dave says, please share on the website for all of us to share via social media. We should do that. Great letter. So why is the PQ still so up in the polls? Well, but don't forget that more than even if when they're up at a level of among francophones, last time I looked, they were at 41%. That means 59% of francophones are not voting for them. This texter saying, I'd vote for him. So how do you feel about it? You can text me a message, and if you have something on your mind, a story we should cover, interesting person we should know, our inbox waiting for your email, tommy@cjad.com. That's where I got this letter. You can follow me on Twitter @TalkRadioTommy, and we've got complete election coverage, of course, available 24/7 at cjad.com. And again, a reminder, 9:30, my guest, part of our political debate every Monday morning at 9:30 during the campaign. Joining me will be Representatives of every political party. The PQ representative coming in will be Jean-François Lisée. More letters, lots more letters coming in on this subject. They're saying, hi there, I'm in Rigaud. On the main street, there's a PQ candidate poster. Right directly across the street, perched on the hill, is this massive building. Guess which building that is. It's one, if not the largest training facility for customs and border services. Men and women from all over Canada come here to train. The feds just spent millions of dollars on renovations and a state-of-the-art shooting range, and employs most of this town. What would become of this place in the event of separation? Do you think Canada could keep a major federal operation in another country? I think not. If Quebec says I've opened borders to Canada, then what will become of this place? And I guess we'll have to wait and see. That whole notion that was let out of the bag when Pauline Marois was talking about it didn't cover all of those issues. What about the tens of thousands of people, Quebecers, who work for the Federal Civil Service? What's going to happen to them? Derek says, send it to La Presse and French media. They need their readers to read it. I believe he wrote it in French as well and has been sending it to the French media. I think that has been the case. There's other letters that I want to share with you as well, and I've got some hints about some brain food, what's healthy for you and what's not healthy for you, what kind of diet can help prevent dementia if you are over age 50. Lots more texts coming in. They're just flooding in reaction to this letter, many of them. It's quite interesting, many of them coming from francophone Federalists who don't often hear from them, and they're quite concerned, as is Mark Blanchard, who wrote the letter. Text your comment to 514-800. You're listening to the Tommy Schnurmacher Show on CJAD. I'll try to get to as many of these texts as I can. I got another letter saying that Mr. Harper should say how he feels about a sovereign Quebec using the loonie and whether Canada would keep its borders open to a sovereign Quebec. I think he should say that. But timing is everything. Perhaps today, this week, during the next 2-3 weeks is not the time for that. Another texter wants me to read this letter to Jean-François Lisée when he comes in studio here Monday morning. You're listening to the Tommy Schnurmacher Show on CJAD. Stay with us.
The Tommy Schnurmacher Show on CJAD 800.
I got an update from Mark Blanchard, who wrote that letter. He said he posted it on Facebook. It's been shared nearly 300 times, making itself available to 60,000 people's news feed. He's had comments from Anglophones expressing how nice it was to hear that many Francophones love their country and province as much as they do. I had comments from Francophones on how wonderful it was that someone put into words how they really felt. People young and old, singles and families, native to Quebec and newcomers, all seem to find common ground through this letter to Monsieur Couillard. And some of the texts, many of the texts I've shared with you, people who really like the letter, but some of the texts are amazing. Listen to this one. It says, invite this person on your show, Tommy. Prove his existence. Can you believe that? Prove his existence. We hear this message so rarely that this texter can't believe such a human being exists. That's how rare the message is. So the letter writer is completely correct in this message that doesn't come out there. Joanne says, although I completely love and agree with the letter, I wish he would have written it in French and sent it to francophone media and newspapers. It's not our votes that are needed. It's the francophone vote. That's from Joanne. Well, he did say he was going to send it to French media as well. The texter who said Bill 101 was the real problem is right. Liberals and PQ all the same on that issue. Peter says that's what ruined Quebec. And this texter says, Tommy, I'm pure laine Québécois, and I had the good fortune of going to English school. It's helped my business more than you can imagine. The problem is keeping people from getting a bilingual education so they can feel part of Canada and our American neighbors. This needs to change in order to stop talking about separation. This is the letter. It's very much on point, as we've articulated, but the damage is done, stemming from Bill 101, which started this closed-minded rhetoric which has defined and hampered the province ever since. So we will try to get him on the show, but it's amazing to me that people actually feel that his existence his existence has to be proven. We're going to put it up on the website because it's a very important. It covers all the bases, and occasionally when we're talking about the subject of separation of PQ, etc., I get text messages from francophones who say, "Well, don't say francophones. Not every francophone who feels that way. There are many who don't." But we rarely hear from the ones who don't. So rarely, as a matter of fact, that when I read a letter from one who feels that way, a very articulate letter, that's why I read the entire thing for you, people wonder, they want proof that he exists. That's what one texter actually said. They wanted to see proof that such a person actually exists. Unbelievable. Anyway, thank you. Don't forget, Jean-François Lisée joining me on Monday.